Thanks for joining us for Khari Free at Last on Bounce 23 TV. I'm Khari Inahara. Nelson Mandela certainly led an inspirational life, but the liberation of South Africa has been the continent's most spectacular failure. Mandela and his party reneged on their own freedom charter, which promised that land, with the natural mineral wealth, the banking systems, as well as all other industry trade would be nationalized and used to benefit South Africa's majority. Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host Earth Jallow, Shabaka Torre of the AARP, and Reverend John Coates. Nelson Mandela has come and gone, Shabaka, but yet the ANC, the African National Congress, many are saying, wait a minute, what change did we make other than the glorification of one man? What happened to the masses of people in South Africa? You've been there. Tell us what you saw.
Well, what I saw was that the masses of the people have been left behind.
What do you mean?
Well, I've traveled to Soweto, where Winnie and Nelson lived for some time, and they took me on this bridge over the proverbial railroad tracks, and as far as the eye could see, nothing but shacks.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute, that's not what we're being told. We're being told that the transformation of South Africa through Nelson Mandela was the greatest thing that ever happened on the planet.
Exactly. Well, the trick starts when you come to the town center in Soweto. The streets are nice, newly paved. There's a big shopping mall. But then I noticed these new condos. And what made me notice them was the way they were built. They were built very strange, kind of high up in the air. So I asked one of my comrades, I said, why are those condos shaped that way? They said, because they don't want you to see what's on the other side.
And what's on the other side?
Well, they took me to the bridge, and that's why I saw, as far as the eye could see, nothing but
shanties.
shacks.
Oh, my God.
And then the brothers told me, they said, our people still use buckets for toilets.
Oh, my God. Reverend Coates, wait a minute. How could this be? President Obama just went over there. All the nations rushed to be there to do the photo ops and everything and praise Mandela. How could this be?
How could what be?
The condition being the same as it is.
Well, first of all, the condition remained the same because that wasn't in the deal. The deal did not embody to change the condition of the people. The deal was to let Mandela out of jail. The deal was to let the so-called free elections to take place, but there's no change in the economy.
What do you mean there's no change?
Because the people...
Document that.
Well, the documentation is that the people are still suffering in South Africa. The documentation is that 90% of the people in South Africa don't own any land. 10% own the land.
10% own the land.
And they're not the native. They're not the natives.
So you telling me apartheid still exists?
Oh, yeah.
Economically, for certain.
Oh, Earth Jallow, is that true?
I think it is. I mean, if 90% of the people who are not natives of the land own the land, then you have the people still living in you know, shacks, and then the people don't even own or control their own resources.
Oh, that's just a few people. That's not the effective majority.
What are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the fact that Nelson Mandela was locked away for 27 years? Because in the end, the people are still
So
suffering.
what is Nelson Mandela's legacy over there, Shabaka Torre?
Well, you know, he lived 95 years. So I think, of course, we had to give him props for the time he served in prison because he definitely chose prison over...
but Reverend Coates says he cut a deal that didn't change apartheid except in the political sense and kept all the control in the hands of the whites over there. Is that true?
Well, that's true, but one thing we can't do is separate Nelson Mandela from his organization, his political party, the African National Congress.
Why not?
Because they were the ones who cut the deal. He was a member of the ANC. He never announced his membership in the ANC.
Wait a minute, you trying to tell me the ANC, you trying to tell me the ANC sold the South African black people out? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, you know, the saying is the proof is in the pudding.
But is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, of course, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, Reverend Coates, come on.
I wouldn't go to that.
Extreme,
I wouldn't go to that extremes. In fact, I don't necessarily reflect on Mr. Mandela's time in prison. I look at the advocacy that he did before he went to prison as well, and the advocacy that other people did.
Shabaka said the ANC sold them out, Reverend
Well, the
Coates.
reality is that Stephen Biko and Winnie Mandela, they didn't sell the people out. ANC had strong leaders within the ANC, including Mr. Mandela, who went to jail for a long period of time.
Long period of time.
We know that the ANC is a political party. Okay? It's a political party.
So what's that got to do with anything?
Well, politics is the control or the influence over limited resources.
Shabaka Torres says the ANC sold South Africa out, sold black people out.
I would not use that strong of terminology.
That's what, Shabaka, did you not say that?
Well, I said that, and John mentioned Steve Biko. Well,
Yes.
we have to realize that Steve Biko broke away from the ANC.
Oh.
And he founded the Black Consciousness Movement.
Which is different from the ANC.
Which is different from the ANC, and it's now has developed into an organization called Azapa,
Oh my
the
God.
Azanian
Hold on
People's
for a minute.
Organization.
Is racial apartheid really over in South Africa? Up next on Khari, Free at Last. Welcome back to Khari, Free at Last. The formal end of racial apartheid in South Africa was to be the accumulation of African triumph over white European rule. In South Africa, blacks were inheriting the biggest economy on the African continent. But things have gotten worse as there has been increased suffering amongst the black population, the supposed victors at the end of racial apartheid. Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host Earth Jallow, Shabaka Torre of the AARP, and the Reverend John Coates. Shabaka, racial apartheid is over in South Africa, right?
Racial apartheid, I don't even know exactly what that means. I think that those are just words that are thrown around to
Well,
make
you
things
jive Alabama.
appear-
What are you talking about?
No, seriously. You know, because you wrote the book Cold Words.
Race Cold War.
Race Cold War, that a lot of these words are used to cover up what's really going on.
So
Just
then
like
you
we-
tell me what racial apartheid means.
Well, I mean, it's like Jim Crow in the South here in America.
Is it over in South Africa, yes or no?
The appearance of racial discrimination, the appearance is over.
Is it over, Reverend Coates?
Yes, it's over, but we need to understand that poverty kills people as well. And black people in South Africa are suffering right now. They're suffering economically.
Well, they're suffering under black rule.
And they're suffering under corrupt black rule.
Well,
Corrupt black rule in South Africa and throughout Africa.
So who you gonna blame for that, Reverend Coates?
We have to blame ourselves plus the evil that exists within the system that manipulates black leadership.
Like, well, like who's doing the manipulating?
Well, the same people that were in rule before.
You talking about the apartheidists?
The apartheid,
Oh, I love that word.
The apartheid, as well as the bankers and the European interests that helped found that nation, all the way back to, remember, South Africa's history. A man by the name of Cecil Rhodes, look him up so you can.
He's out of Rhodesia, but he's out of Rhodesia. That's not South Africa.
But his influence.
That was down to Zimbabwe, and yet he set up that whole.
Exactly.
But they partitioned Africa in 1887, where each one of the colonial powers took a piece of earth.
Yes.
Apartheid over in South Africa?
Absolutely not. When you have 90% of the people who are invaders that own the land, and 13%, and the people only make 13% of what the white Afrikaners make.
What the average one makes.
Yeah. How could it possibly be over?
Well, because you can now go downtown. You don't have to have a pass
still
card.
poor?
I mean,
You're still poor. You're still starving. You still live in a shack. I mean, how is that? How did it improve? Are we
they're not
really?
starving in South Africa, are they, Shabaka?
AIDS is
Yes, they
AIDS and
are.
HIV
They
too.
are.
AIDS
Yes.
is off the hook.
They're
Yes.
starving in South Africa?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Where's your
Dying.
evidence?
Oh,
Give me
yes.
evidence that they're starving in South Africa,
Well,
'cause that's
but-
not what we're hearing.
Right, well, you know, the thing of it is, I was there, so I know what I saw.
And what did you see?
And what I saw was people living in shacks. What I saw was people that looked like they were in need.
But what about the black middle class in
Well,
South Africa? The growing black middle class.
Well, that's one thing that I did see. There is a growing middle class in Azania, or so-called
so it
South
takes
Africa.
time to take people out of
But
that,
here-
doesn't
but-
it?
but-
A what? You called it a what?
Tanzania.
We thought the
With
name was supposed to be changed to that when the African National Congress took over.
Exactly.
But that didn't happen.
But that didn't happen. But let me deal with this black middle class. Here's how they live. Here's what I saw. They live in compounds with 8-foot-high walls with either barbed wire around the top or broken glass around the top with an armed security guard at the gate.
Wow.
Now, that's how the so-called black middle class lives. But this so-called growth of the black middle class, that's nothing new, because they become the buffer between the masses of African people and the minority whites who are still in power.
Let me say something. Now, the Truth and Reconciliation thing that went on with Bishop Tutu, Desmond Tutu running around there. But anyway, that was supposed to have taken care of the problem.
It wasn't
that was supposed to have been. That was yes, it was. That was supposed to be the end of apartheid.
It wasn't supposed to take care of the problem. What it was supposed to do was to reveal what actually took place. Now, somebody should have gone to jail. In fact, a whole lot of people should have gone to jail, and other people should have been executed.
Well, nobody went to jail.
When he went to jail.
But the stories got out of what happened. In America, we still don't know who all were lynched. We still don't know who all's at the bottom of some river somewhere. We still don't know all of the stories. But in South Africa,
but there was no justice, John.
There was no justice. There was no justice. The stories were told.
So you cried. So you sit there and lamented.
So you know.
There was no justice, John.
And Bishop Tutu did cry.
Well,
he did. But I've never seen crying like that ever.
So
what's
we
new
know.
from him?
Right.
and so we know, but what does that do for the people and the condition in the land that is not owned by the people? So what? We know what they did. They should have had to serve some type of punishment for what went on.
Well, first of all, let me, as an African-American educator, as you are, half of what you do is to inform your students as to what happened.
True.
Okay, because they have no clue.
Absolutely.
There is no record. There is no tape.
So
there is
what's
no
your
DVD
point?
you can put them. But now South Africa has that information
But
recorded.
see, there's a difference between educating and teaching about what happened and what apartheid was. I don't think they need to hear all the gory stories. What they need to hear
Don't you
is
tell
that,
gory stories?
No, is that the families were separated, they were killed, women and children and innocent men. That's, you don't need
Sounds
to go
familiar,
into,
doesn't it?
but
Sounds
you don't
familiar,
need to go
doesn't
into detail. You need to make sure that they have the correct information, both sides.
But John says it was good.
It wasn't good.
That's what he said. He said the good thing that came out of it.
It was
That's
emotional.
What he's saying.
I didn't say it was the only thing that should have come out of it.
But you said it was good.
It was.
Was it good?
But no, it wasn't good because, like you said, the people that needed to go to jail ain't
Didn't go.
seen the inside of no jail.
The clerk never went to jail.
Exactly.
Right.
Both of them never went to jail. None of those races went to jail. But to this very day, there are fighters from the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania
That's right.
in prison today.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wait, Mr. Mandela didn't free him?
No.
Mandela didn't free them?
As a matter of fact, just recently there was an appeal made to the current president, Jacob Zuma, to pardon these people.
And what did Zuma do?
Well, they ain't been pardoned yet.
Zuma zoomed.
He zoomed on out the way.
Zoomed on out the way.
That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
As a matter of fact, wasn't he the one that was booed when he got up to speak? The people of South Africa booed him.
Yeah, but the former president, who they also called corrupt, was he was cheered when he came in.
You know,
Some of them Becky?
Yes.
You're talking about the people are confused. Is that what you're saying?
Of course, the people
This
are
has created confusion.
Exactly, and that's part of the strategy.
So the middle class is played against the vast majority. It keeps the majority poor.
And that's the
it
same
keeps the
old
same
story.
system in
Right.
place.
That's the
is what you're
same
telling me.
old story around the world. That's the
Absolutely.
role of the middle class, because they're your managers.
and I think that
Whoa,
they...
wait a minute.
yeah.
John is middle class. What are you trying to say about him?
and you're upper middle class. We have.
What
What do you say about that?
I'm lower middle class. What are you trying to say about the middle class, son?
Well, all middle class are not unconscious.
That's right.
There
Well-
are some middle class who commit quote-unquote class suicide and actually do something for the people.
And you're
but
saying-
by and large, the middle class is used to be the middle managers. Their job
he's
is to
saying
keep the
the
masses...
black middle class is worthless. That's what he's saying.
It's just funny to me.
Is that true?
Yeah. And it's just funny
Oh.
to me that, you know, Reagan and Bush and everybody is over there, you know, with Mandela, but yet he was a terrorist until
I
2008.
haven't heard Madiba
Reagan
so many
wasn't there.
times in my life.
Okay.
You know, and that was supposed to be a term of
De
endearment.
Klerk is over there.
Everybody
All right.
loved Mandela.
yeah, well, that's
So, you know, have we been
All
duped
right,
again?
hold on for a minute. Black power, true or false? Up next, on Khari, free at last. Welcome back to Khari, free at last. So what happened? And what can the South African experience teach us about the failure of African decolonization more generally? In the new South Africa, the maintenance of white power was explicit, even as it was hidden beneath the veneer of black political empowerment. Joining me, I got it, didn't I? Joining me is TalkDavidRadio.com host Irv Jallow, Shabaka Torre, Man, that's a great name. AARP and the Reverend John Coates. How'd you get that, Nick? It used to be Sam Johnson.
Man, don't be giving them my secrets in public, man.
Wow.
Does black power really exist, Reverend Coates?
Well, I think you just phrased it, the veneer of black empowerment.
I love that
I
word.
call them shiny Negroes. And what,
Watch out now.
and all that glitters is not gold. And what?
Wait a minute, stop right there. Wait a minute. Give me a definition of shiny Negroes.
Well, all that glitters is not gold. There are those that have the appearance as if they are in control, but they really don't run nothing at all. And in 2014, you have people that are Brooks Brothers suit wearing, you know, Armani suit wearing, and Ralph Lauren shirt wearing, but yet they're still slaves in 2014.
So, Shabaka, what Reverend Coates is saying is that black people really do not run South Africa. Is that true?
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, we don't run Africa
But you
at
got a
all.
black president.
Let me tell you something. In Africa, the best we have is a flag and a national anthem.
You got a
That's
black
it.
parliament. What are you talking about?
So what?
So,
Because it's not changing the lives of the people. And how do you judge political systems is how well they take care of the people.
So you're saying they really don't have political power?
No, they have no political
Because if
power.
they had political power, they would have taken over the bank,
Yeah.
they would have taken the land, they would
Of
have
course.
completely controlled everything.
Of course. And let
So
me tell
what
you
they
something.
got?
Well, that's a big question because just a few weeks ago, African leaders were meeting in Paris to quote unquote talk about Africa's problems. Why Paris? Why are you in Paris? Well, that's because where your handlers are. So you want to be close to your handlers because it would make sense for African leaders to be meeting somewhere in Africa talking about Africa's problems.
In fact, the only revolutionary system that was happening in Africa is being dismantled and challenged. Its leader was shot in the head and drug out before the public to view as dead. No. Muammar Gaddafi was killed. And we talk about he just wasn't Libya,
Now,
but he was
wait a
the
minute,
Organization of African Unity.
Wait a minute. Gaddafi said some horrible statements about black people. I'm sorry. I can't go.
Okay, well, Castro actually
Gaddafi
helped.
said some bad things about black folks.
Okay,
But
Can
you know
we go to
what, though,
Castro?
Khari?
That I can't. No.
If we were to lay all of our lives out publicly, there'd be many things that we're ashamed of.
He said it
things
publicly.
that publicly, privately,
How did
whatever.
he treat black people in Libya?
Well,
That's what I thought.
No.
Took you too long.
You had more black immigrants going to work in Libya than any other place in Africa.
I said, how did he treat? Yeah, you can go to work as a slave laborer, so what?
But that's not
how
what,
did he treat
that
him?
was not what was happening. The Africans in Africa would be treated
Dr.
fairly.
John Henry
but
Clark
here's
said,
what
wait a
happened.
minute, hold on. Dr. John Henry Clark, the esteemed historian, said that what Muammar Gaddafi was trying to do was take control of Africa and Arabize it. That's the problem what I have with the earth. Jump in here.
Well, I'm going to jump in, and since you all are talking about him, I want to bring up Castro because, you know, Madiba was friends with Castro. And so,
You know him too. Madiba. Okay.
Well,
I know it too.
Well, the president wanted to shake his hand.
And they made a big deal about, you know, President Obama shaking his hand or whatever, Raul's hand. And I'm like, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that President Obama snubbed Winnie Mandela on national television.
Did he?
Walked
Yes,
right past
he
her.
did. He hugged the president wife and kissed her. And gave her a nice hug. Winnie was sitting right next
Gave her a
to
nice
her. And
kiss.
nobody's going to
Gave her a
tell
nice
me
kiss, too.
that he didn't notice her or he didn't recognize her.
Of all the people in South Africa, Winnie Mandela is most responsible
Absolutely.
for the revolution that took place.
Without
down there.
question.
She's
Without
most-
question.
So why would the president snub her?
That's what I would like to ask him.
Because
If I
I
would ever
believe-
get in the arena, I would like to ask him that because as a black woman, he got on national television and showed us what he really felt about us. That's how I took it because even if he was instructed to snub her, he should have said no because I'm married to Michelle. Michelle was a black woman. I need to show the world that we love and respect and we care about our black women.
Shabaka, what does it mean when he went past Winnie Mandela?
What that means is that he doesn't accept her quote-unquote politics, which apparently are opposite than her husband's.
Yes, they
So
were.
what you don't want to do is identify with anything revolutionary, anything real, anything that would say, oh, we agree with returning the land to the majority of the people.
So there really is no black power in South Africa.
No, there's no black power.
What
It's
is
the
there then?
appearance of black
What
power.
is it? Give me a
Symbols
title outside
over
of shiny,
substance.
outside of shiny Negroes.
Yeah, well, you know, Malcolm said it. The form has changed, but the essence remains the same. They ain't got no problem with black people, quote unquote, running things things are appearing to run things in Azani or so-called South Africa, because we've been running things for years there. Lawnmowers, washing machines, dishwashers, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Sound like us.
So we've been running things, but the people that we're running them for is the one that's in control,
So
not us.
more symbols over substance.
Of course.
That seems to be the nature of the conditions.
But when we
surrounding
look
black
into
people.
symbols, you know, Winnie didn't get any presidential sugar, but yet Raul Castro did.
Right.
And the issue is that why would the president of the United States shake the hand of the leader, the acting leader of Cuba, okay, a communist nation who we have a large constituency of in the South, in Florida, within our nation? Why did he feel comfortable
And
in
according
doing
to
that?
Carlos Moore, black people are catching you-know-what in Cuba.
Oh.
And the Castro, according to Carlos Moore and the Castro, the racism was at an all-time high. You couldn't even discuss it down in Cuba.
You can't
This is in Cuba, which supposedly had no race problem.
Well, there are people who would disagree with that view, and I think one of the things we have to look at, just some simple things. For example,
No,
when
wait a minute.
Katrina-
The poorest black people, the poorest people in Cuba are black. The least educated black people, least educated people in Cuba are black. The highest prisoners, the largest number of prisoners in Cuba are black. You tell me that's not
That's
racism.
all over the world.
You tell me what Castro did in 50 years in Cuba.
I think
outside
one of
of
the things that we have to look at, for
Stay
example,
right there. Does black
Get
leadership,
cut off, just cut you off.
does black leadership really exist here or anywhere? Next on Khari Free at Last. Welcome back to Khari Free at Last. Does black leadership really exist, or is it a game of symbols over substance? The symbol is that black people get the illusion that they have more power and control, but in reality, their communities and lives never change, or it gets even worse, and they are left living in a world of denial. Joining me is TalkTainmentRadio.com host Earth Jallow, who loves Fidel Castro, Shabaka Torre, the AARP, and the Reverend John Coates. What are you talking about, Fidel? I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I ain't. What are you talking about, Fidel Castro
Hey,
did all
I'm
this
just
for black
saying,
folk?
I'm not saying that he did a whole lot, but what I'm saying was Madiba had a relationship with him
So?
because of the fact that he did lend some military power to South Africa during apartheid.
Madiba had a relationship, or Mandela had a relationship with F.W. Clerk. So what?
That wasn't no relationship. That was a farce.
He
No,
had-
it wasn't. They both got Nobel
Mr.
Prizes.
Mandela,
They shared.
They were hugging each other.
Mr. Mandela had relationships with many socialists around the world, okay? Had relationships with many communists around the world. And he had other things in common with them, too, such as legalizing abortion, making abortion more easier, and also making gay rights.
who are we
Black
talking about,
leadership.
Castro or Mandela? Thank
Shabaka,
you.
black leadership. Is there any real black leadership? According to y'all, there ain't nothing out there. Y'all scaring me. Is there any real black leadership, Shabaka?
Yes, I mean, there's always leadership, but the question is, who are the ones who are being promoted as our leaders?
Right.
What do you mean?
That's the question. I
So
mean,
you're saying anybody that's in the mainstream press is not somebody who we can count on. Is that what you're telling me?
that's what I'm saying.
Oh, come on,
That's what
Shabaka.
I'm
Well, it's apparent because if America has listed, Mandela as a terrorist, he was just taken off the no-fly list in 2008. Then why is he all over our television sets for 2-3 days at a time?
John, does black leadership really exist?
Black leadership does exist.
It does?
It certainly does, certainly, but it may not be promoted. Black leadership, when it raises its heads, it's killed often. It's certainly villainized. So
you're saying real black leadership is incarcerated or dead. Is that what you're telling me?
or villainized.
Or villainized? Wow, Shabaka, Earth, is that true?
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the things that we can say, we were talking about Castro and Cuba. One thing that we have to look at is when Katrina hit, Cuba was one of the first
talk about
countries that stepped up and said,
No, that was Hugo Chavez.
No, that was Chavez.
That was Chavez
that
of
was
Venezuela.
Venezuela
And Chavez
and Cuba.
was not a communist.
No. That was Venezuela and Cuba. And George Bush said no. Cuba responded, Venezuela responded
Black
before the
people in-
Congressional
black people-
Caucus responded.
Black people in Cuba are catching you know what. I can't say it on TV. As I've said before, the highest rate of incarceration, the lowest educated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just as bad as being in other places, but they hide it under the veneer of we don't
Well,
discuss
first of all,
race here.
on
It's
behalf,
bad
on,
down
beha-
there for
on-
black
on
people.
behalf of the Council on Foreign Relations, we want to congratulate you today.
I ain't hearing that.
I'm
no,
really
you're just a
tripping.
communist.
Oh, wow.
You're supporting communist agenda.
Well, doesn't
You're
America
super
support?
socialist.
Doesn't America support communism? Doesn't America support communism? I mean, look at what.
we do.
So why is everybody here keep hearing, oh, communism is bad, communism, but America supports communism?
Well, yes, we do, because communist China. We get go to
Oh,
Walmart
yeah.
or anywhere else. That's where you get your
But
clothes
here's
from.
the thing, communism does not even exist.
Thank you.
That's the first thing. Socialism exists, but communism hasn't even arrived yet. Even the USSR, which they call communist, was a United Soviet Socialist Republic, not communist
So why are
republic.
Chinese calling themselves communists?
Well,
why is
because
Fidel
because
Castro
people
calling
can
himself
call
a communist?
themselves all
Whatever they
Well, then
like.
that means it exists.
Well, no. You can have a theory of something, and then you can have reality.
They
What you
practice
have
communism.
in Cuba is socialism.
Well, black people call themselves free.
And the statistics, the things that you're saying about Africans in Cuba, that's not the information I found.
Well, then you got
And
the wrong
and then-
information.
well, then you may have the wrong
No,
information.
Assata not back yet.
Thank you. And she talks about racism in Cuba. She talks about
well,
that.
that's good. Thanks to TalkTaylor.com, host Irv Jallo, Shabaka Torre, the AARP, and Reverend John Coach.
God bless
Thank
America.
you for joining us for Khari, free at last on Bounce 23 TV.